Business proposal begins by showing a man named Kang Tae-mo, who has just arrived from abroad with his secretary, a man named Ja Seung-hoon. Kang Tae-mo is the president and director of a company in the food business. Due to his handsome face and charismatic appearance, Tae-mo is greatly admired by those around him. That day, Tae-mo is scheduled to attend a welcoming ceremony at his company. However, Tae-mo instead sends his secretary to deliver a welcome address at the company while he goes elsewhere. Tae-mo's grandfather, Mr. Kang, seemed furious when he found out that his grandson had deliberately missed the welcoming ceremony. Elsewhere, Tae-mo is seen meeting Mr. Park, one of the company's top brass, which often exploits the company for personal gain. Tae-mo's purpose in meeting Mr. Park is to warn him because he already knows Mr. Park's cheating in the company. The scene then switches and shows a woman named Shin Ha-ri who works at Go Food, a company headed by Kang Tae-mo. Ha-ri is a food researcher on the research team led by Mrs. Yo. It was Ha-ri's birthday. Mrs. Yo and her partners plan to have a simple party to celebrate Ha-ri's birthday. However, Ha-ri suddenly cancels the event because she gets a message from her crush, a man named Min-gue, asking her to come to see him. She looks happy and immediately accepts his request. On the way to the restaurant where Min-gue works, Ha-ri tells about her crush on her best friend, a woman named Jin Young-so. Young-so then cheers on Ha-ri by saying that Min-gue might like her because he gave her a pretty lavish birthday present last year. However, once there, Ha-ri has to swallow her disappointment because Min-gue gave her a concert ticket and hopes that she can go to the concert with the man she's dating. Meanwhile, Mr. Kang, who is still annoyed with his grandson, then urges Tae-mo to get married soon. Knowing that Tae-mo has been so busy at work that he doesn't have time to date, Mr. Kang has arranged blind dates with several women of his choice from the upper classes. But Tae-mo refuses to go on a blind date because he thinks it's a waste of time. Mr. Kang and Tae-mo finally make a deal, in which Mr. Kang will comply with Tae-mo's request to fire Mr. Park as long as Tae-mo is willing to go on blind dates with the women of his choice. On the other hand, Ha-ri gets into trouble with a man who is her neighbor and requires her to pay compensation of 800,000 won. While Ha-ri is confused about getting money to make up for the loss, Young-so offers a solution by asking Ha-ri to go on a blind date in her stead. Young-so, who comes from a wealthy family, refuses to go on a blind date arranged by her father because she wants to marry a man of her own choice. Because of this, Young-so asks Ha-ri to take her place and ruins the blind date for 800,000 won. Hearing this, Ha-ri immediately agreed. However, unexpectedly, the man who will go on a blind date with Young-so turns out to be Kang Tae-mo, the head of the company where Ha-ri works. Having already said yes, Ha-ri does everything crazy and disrespectful to make Tae-mo feel bad for her so that he can cancel their date. Unexpectedly, Tae-mo is actually attracted to Ha-ri, who he thinks is acting as she is, unlike most women from rich families he meets. When a woman thinks Ha-ri is her husband's mistress, Ha-ri takes the opportunity to make Tae-mo hate her even more. However, Tae-mo becomes even more attracted to Ha-ri and intends to marry her instead. Ha-ri thinks that her mission to screw up Young-so and Tae-mo's blind date has been a success. However, she is surprised by Young-so, who informs her that Kang Tae-mo even asked her to marry. After that, Young-so, who was in a convenience store, accidentally got into an incident with a boy. To comfort the boy from crying and being sad, Young-so then draws flowers on her white skirt. Unbeknownst to her, Seung-hoon was there and smiled at her concern for the little boy. Young-so and Seung-hoon then accidentally bump into each other, where Young-so seems to be attracted to the handsome and charismatic Seung-hoon. The next day, Ha-ri has to go back undercover as Young-so and meet Tae-mo to confirm they won't date, let alone get married. She must end it all right now before it's too late. However, on the way, Ha-ri sees Min-gue walking toward her. Not wanting Min-gue to see herself dressed sexy and using excessive makeup, Ha-ri enters a car to hide. But as it turns out, she meets Tae-mo again in the car with his secretary. Tae-mo then asks why Ha-ri doesn't want to marry him. Ha-ri, who gets on a mission to get Tae-mo to cancel their wedding plans, says she doesn't like everything about him because his face resembles a fowl. Afterward, Young-so invites Ha-ri out for a drink, where she tells about a handsome man she met in front of a convenience store. Young-so purposely invites Ha-ri for a drink nearby because she hopes to meet again with the man who is now her crush. The next day, one of Ha-ri's co-workers, a young woman named Hae-ji, asks Mrs. Yo to meet her date. Hari secretly follows Haiji and is very surprised to discover that Haiji's date is Min-gue, the one Hari has loved for so long. Hari immediately feels sad and heartbroken because her co-worker is dating the one she loves. After that, Hari accidentally gets involved in an embarrassing incident at the office that causes Tae-mo to chase after her. She tries to hide her face when confronted by Tae-mo. But it turns out that Tae-mo recognizes Hari's name because he's read the proposal she wrote and is very interested in her idea in the proposal. That night, Young-so is forced to meet Tae-mo in person and confesses that she hired a paid actress to go on a blind date because she refused to be matched by her family. She tries to end it all, but Tae-mo instead asks her to set him up with the woman disguised as Young-so because he seems very annoyed that Young-so and the woman have tricked him. Young-so has no choice but to comply with Tae-mo's request because Tae-mo is willing to cancel their marriage if he brings him to Hari. Not long after, Hari, who turned out to have been framed by Young-so, is finally reunited with Tae-mo, where he accidentally finds the business card of a chicken restaurant is a business run by Hari's family. Since Tae-mo already knows Hari's address, he threatens to go to the restaurant and make a mess if Hari doesn't do what he wants. She then apologizes to him for lying and wasting his time. However, Tae-mo doesn't just let Hari go. Unable to pay with money or gifts, Hari offers that she will be there whenever he needs her. Hari, who refuses to reveal her true identity for fear of being fired, confesses to being Shin Geum-hoo to Tae-mo. Whereas Shin Geum-hoo is the main female character in a drama loved by Mr. Kong and Hari's family. Because his wedding plans with Young-so were cancelled, Tae-mo finally had to go on blind dates with several women at once a day. Even he has to go to the trouble of going to Japan just to go on a blind date with the woman of his grandfather's choice. Tired of all the blind dates arranged by his grandfather, Tae-mo then confesses to his grandfather that he already has a girlfriend. He then asks Hari to pretend to be his girlfriend by offering her a high fee. Hari suddenly hesitates at Tae-mo's request because she really doesn't want to further get involved with her boss. However, Hari doesn't deny that she needs money because her family is in debt and Tae-mo's offer is quite tempting. She was finally forced to comply with Tae-mo's request because she accidentally hurt him. After that, Hari is asked to memorize everything about Tae-mo and the fake love story he has prepared so that his grandfather doesn't suspect their love affair. Elsewhere, Young-so turns out to be again forced to go on a blind date by her father because he expects her to marry a man who will be able to lead and manage their company. However, Young-so, who refuses to be matched, finally decides to leave the house and leave all the luxurious facilities of her father. Meanwhile, at Go Food, Mrs. Yo gets into trouble because the chef she recommended to the company is involved in a scandal, so Tae-mo urges her to find a replacement as soon as possible. In the end, Mrs. Yo then tells Hari to persuade Min-gue to let him become a substitute chef. Long story short, Min-gue agrees to be a substitute chef, and Hari then prepares everything before their team submits a new proposal and presents it in front of Tae-mo and other company officials. Since Hari worked on the proposal, Mrs. Yo urges her to make a presentation in front of the company's top brass. Not wanting her face to be recognized by Tae-mo, Hari is forced to make a presentation wearing a mask, arguing that she has the flu. That evening, when their proposal has been approved, Hari then meets Min-gue at a restaurant to tell him about the good news. However, she instead sees him making out with a woman named Awry, his ex-girlfriend. Min-gue and Awry apparently decided to make up and get back into a relationship. Hari immediately felt her heart shattered because she had hoped Min-gue to see her not as an ordinary friend, but as a woman who loved him with all her heart. However, seeing Min-gue dating Awry again, Hari thinks her hopes have been dashed, so she can no longer hold back her tears. Hari, who was sobbing, apparently didn't realize that she had answered Tae-mo's phone call, so Tae-mo knew she was crying. Tae-mo finally takes Hari to meet his grandfather and introduces her as his girlfriend a few days later. Mr. Kong seems to really like Hari, and they soon become friends. While eating together, Mr. Kong accidentally sees the concert ticket Min-gue gave him and thinks that Hari had planned to go with Tae-mo to the concert. He then urges Tae-mo to take Hari to the concert. It turns out that the concert is a concert of Hari's favorite musician, where Min-gue makes a request that Hari can attend the concert with the man who will be her life partner. Hearing this, Hari looks uneasy because she watched the concert with Tae-mo. While listening to her favorite song, she recalls her moments with Min-gue, who only considered her a friend for the past 7 years. Hari couldn't hold back her tears either and cried throughout the concert. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Young-so is seen moving into an apartment and turns out to be living next door to Seung-hoon. After the concert, Hari talks about her unrequited love because her best friend decided to reconcile with his ex. When Hari and Taimo were eating together on the roadside, suddenly, a ball hit Hari's eye and swelled her eyes. Before leaving, Hari suggests that Taimo immediately end their fake relationship and start dating a woman seriously to not waste time. Afterward, Hari gives the gift she got from the concert to Taimo and thanks him for accompanying her. The next day at work, Hari has to cover her eyes so Taimo doesn't see her. Meanwhile, Min-gue seems to be able to impress Taimo with his skills as a chef, and their team gets praise and massive promotions to market their products. On the other hand, Seung-hoon turns out to be cold to Young-so, even refusing to be friends with her because of Young-so and Taimo's cancelled match, where Seung-hoon doesn't want to get into trouble with their families. Therefore, Young-so tries to be indifferent to Seung-hoon when they bump into each other at the gym. There, Young-so becomes acquainted with a man named Shin, her neighbor, and tries to get close to him. Even though he is a decent man and quite handsome, she seems only interested in Seung-hoon. Shin then presents a lamp to Young-so, and she accepts. A few days later, Taimo invites Hari to celebrate their anniversary. Even though they are in a fake relationship, Taimo prepares everything for their celebration day and invites Hari to dinner at his grandfather's fancy restaurant. The date was very memorable for Taimo and Hari, who both enjoyed the beautiful romantic moments they had together. When Taimo drives Hari home, she accidentally leaves her purse in Taimo's car. Taimo opens the wallet to find Hari's identity out of curiosity. He is shocked when he finds out that the woman he is in a fake relationship with is not Shin Joon-woo, but Shin Hari, who turns out to be his employee. So that Hari doesn't realize that he already knows her true identity, Taimo then throws the wallet around the restaurant owned by Hari's family. Not long after, Hari's younger brother, Ha-min, finds the wallet and returns it to Hari. Knowing that he has been lied to by his own employees, Taimo decides to avenge Hari's actions. He deliberately makes things difficult for Hari at work, forces her to come to his office as his girlfriend, and at the same time, appoints Hari as the winner of the Best Employee Award. So she inevitably has to come to the office for the event or pay some money as a penalty for refusing Taimo's wishes. Hari feels very frustrated because she is in a desperate situation. On the other hand, Taimo, visiting Seung-hoon's house, accidentally finds Young-so's package sent the wrong way. Not wanting Taimo to know that he is next door to Young-so, Seung-hoon then asks Young-so to keep his distance from him. Since then, Young-so has been avoiding Seung-hoon, even distancing herself and sitting far apart when they bump into each other at the diner. Hit by the frustration that weighs heavily on her mind, Hari then tries to vent it all by drinking until she gets drunk. She then calls Taimo to apologize and begs him not to have to pay the penalty because she doesn't have the money. Because she was so drunk, Hari accidentally fell. But that makes Taimo look for Hari's whereabouts because he's so worried about her. When they finally meet, a drunk Hari confesses to Taimo that she is Shin Hari and apologizes to him for lying. After that, Taimo finally realized that he had been really caring for Shin Hari and decided to fire her as Shin Joon-woo, so the fake relationship agreement was cancelled. Hearing this, Hari is overjoyed to finally be free from this burden. Elsewhere, Young-so accidentally drops the lamp Shin gave her and finds a hidden camera inside. When she was about to report the incident to the police station, Shin turned out to be there and immediately pushed her down, then took the evidence away. Seung-hoon, who accidentally saw the incident, immediately chased Shin and arrested him for being taken to the police station. At the same time, Taimo and Hari are there, and he accidentally calls Hari by her real name, much to Hari's surprise. At the police station, Shin is instead released and only required to pay a fine because the evidence is not enough to imprison him. Young-so and Hari, who heard this, immediately felt irritated because they felt that they had been wronged. Hearing that Hari's friend is in trouble, Taimo then intervenes by threatening Shin and making sure that he is sued by his victims and thrown in prison. Taimo, who seems to have fallen in love with Shin Hari, then decides to confess his love for her and invites her to dinner. However, Hari thinks Taimo will fire her and begs him not to fire her. Seung-hoon then suggests that Tae-mo first approach Hari before confessing his love for her. Since they had previously had a fake relationship, so she would think that Tae-mo didn't really like her. Because their friends always corner Hari by saying that she will never have a boyfriend. An annoyed Young-so then tells them that Hari already has a handsome and rich boyfriend. Hearing that, for some reason, Min-gue looked displeased. Meanwhile, Tae-mo tries to do everything he can to be alone with Hari and create a romantic atmosphere. He even takes her out of town on a date with the excuse of going on a business trip. At the same time, Young-so, who was drinking at a bar, accidentally met Seung-hoon. As Young-so avoids him, an annoyed Seung-hoon grabbed her arm and tells her not to avoid him anymore. A drunk Young-so then reveals that she fell in love with Seung-hoon at first sight. Unexpectedly, he feels the same way. They both then kissed. That night, it rained with lightning, which made Tae-mo reminisce about his past trauma, where he lost his parents in an accident on a rainy day. He then drops Hari off midway and leaves her to cool off. However, Tae-mo immediately realizes that he's made a mistake and then returns to pick up Hari. But it turns out that she is no longer there and heads to the hotel. Unexpectedly, Hari instead meets Yura and her friends there, where they then urge Hari to introduce her handsome and rich boyfriend. Fortunately, Tae-mo then appears in front of them and introduces himself as Hari's boyfriend. Because of this, Hari has to follow Tae-mo's scenario of pretending to be his girlfriend, where Tae-mo openly confesses to Hari's friends that he is the head of the Go Food company and treats them to dinner at a fancy restaurant. Yura then tells Min-gue that Hari is dating Kang Tae-mo, who is her boss, which makes Min-gue feel jealous. And so does Yura, because Hari is dating a rich and handsome man. The next day, Young-so is shocked to find that she woke up in Seung-hoon's bedroom and finally realizes that she had a one-night stand with Seung-hoon. Embarrassed, Young-so then asks Seung-hoon to forget what happened last night, where her words actually made him feel very disappointed. Meanwhile, Tae-mo tries to impress Yura and Hari's friends so that they no longer corner Hari for never having a boyfriend. That night, Tae-mo then confesses his love for Hari and gives her time to answer. Hearing Tae-mo's declaration of love, Hari looks very surprised and tries to convince herself many times that she's not dreaming when Kang Tae-mo, her boss, confesses his love for her. Shortly afterward, Mr. Kang finds out that Tae-mo is dating Hari and looks furious because he thinks Tae-mo has cheated on Shin Geun-hui. Tae-mo finally admits that he has broken up with Geun-hui. Meanwhile, Hari seems to be worried about her own feelings. At first, she wanted to reject Tae-mo's declaration of love. However, she felt sad if she had to part with him for some reason. While at the office, Tae-mo meets Hari secretly and asks about the answer. Not wanting to be caught by his grandfather, Tae-mo then invites Hari to hide. Hari then tells Tae-mo that their relationship won't work out because of differences in social status. Mr. Kang is against their relationship, so she reluctantly rejects Tae-mo's love, even though she loves him. However, Tae-mo does not necessarily give up and will try to get Hari, so he asks her to stay by his side. After they kiss, Hari thinks she's made a mistake and asks Tae-mo to forget about it. On the other hand, Young-so tried to clarify the misunderstanding between her and Seung-hoon about their one-night stand a while ago, and they are finally officially dating. Meanwhile, Tae-mo tries to be affectionate with Hari by taking her out to dinner and going on a date to the playground. But then, Hari gets a call from her mother and informs her that her father is being treated at the hospital due to surgery for appendicitis. Hari and Tae-mo then head to the hospital, where Hari introduces Tae-mo to his parents instead of being her boss. She tries to hide Tae-mo's identity because her parents hate Tae-mo's figure as a company leader who is cruel and cold to all his subordinates, including Hari. At the same time, Min-gue, who was helping Ha-min at the restaurant, accidentally gets hurt and goes to Hari's room to get some medicine. However, he accidentally stumbles upon a fake relationship contract between Hari and Tae-mo and assumes that the romance between them is just pretending. Tae-mo is annoyed at being seen as a cruel and cold boss, then asks Hari to kiss him as a penalty. Min-gue overheard their conversation, then hit Tae-mo, and almost a fight broke out between them. However, Hari immediately intervenes and sends Tae-mo home, taking Min-gue away. Min-gue thinks that the fake relationship contract was Tae-mo's idea, then insults him in front of Hari. However, Hari defends Tae-mo by saying that Min-woo shouldn't interfere in their business. She then texts Tae-mo and apologizes to him. After learning that Tae-mo has broken up with Goom-hui, Mr. Kong then arranges a blind date for him, where his date this time is Jo Yoo-sung, the daughter of the leader of the Marine group who is Young-so's boss. Tae-mo is forced to obey his grandfather's request to go on a blind date. Meanwhile, Hari is taking part in a volleyball match between teams at her company, where the winner will get a chance to date their handsome company leader, Kong Tae-mo. Not wanting Tae-mo to date another woman, Hari tries her best to win the match, even though her hand is injured. Hari finally wins the match, but she suddenly feels sad and disappointed when she finds out that Tae-mo is going on a blind date with a rich woman. Hari doesn't want to lose Tae-mo, then calls him and asks him to cancel his blind date and take responsibility for making her fall in love so much. Unexpectedly, it turns out that Tae-mo really doesn't want to go on a blind date and is waiting for Hari in front of her house. Hari and Tae-mo finally meet at a romantic place, where they later confess their love to each other and kiss. Elsewhere, it turns out that Tae-mo asks Seung-hoon to go on a blind date with Yoo-sung. However, Seung-hoon immediately tells Yoo-sung that Tae-mo wants to marry someone else, so their date will not continue. But it seems that Yoo-sung is actually attracted to Seung-hoon, who is very handsome, even though he has said he already has a girlfriend. Long story short, Tae-mo and Hari end up dating, and Tae-mo always does romantic things for his girlfriend, such as taking her breakfast together before leaving for work and giving Hari something to send to her office, which makes her co-workers curious. Tae-mo blatantly invites her to have lunch together in front of Min-woo and the reporters because Hari has won the volleyball match. That night, Seung-hoon is surprised by the appearance of a heavily drunk Yoo-sung at his house. Feeling like throwing up, he allows her to use the toilet at his house. However, Young-so comes to Seung-hoon's house for dinner at the same time. Not wanting to get into trouble, Seung-hoon is forced to lie to Young-so by saying that there are guests at his house. Elsewhere, Yoo-ra urges Min-woo to marry her immediately. However, he refuses because he is not ready for marriage. Long story short, Mr. Kong finds out that Tae-mo had asked Seung-hoon to go on a blind date with Yoo-sung, and he is furious. It didn't stop there. Seung-hoon got into trouble when Young-so finally found out about the incident between him and Yoo-sung. She became angry and left Seung-hoon. Young-so then tells Hari everything and says that what irritates her the most is that Seung-hoon always does whatever Tae-mo asks, like going on blind dates to replace him. Young-so and Hari then quietly follow Seung-hoon and Tae-mo, about to go somewhere. It turns out that they visited an orphanage where Seung-hoon's mother is the head of the orphanage. Seung-hoon's mother then straightens out the misunderstanding between Young-so and Seung-hoon by saying that Seung-hoon and Tae-mo's relationship is more like brothers. Because they have known each other since childhood, Tae-moo's family became permanent donors at the orphanage. Seung-hoon and Young-so finally make up and promise to be open to each other about each other's lives, so that there are no more misunderstandings. Meanwhile, Tae-mo and Hari seem to be getting closer day by day, and Tae-mo can't wait to reveal their love affair to Mr. Kong and hopes that his grandfather will approve of their relationship. Due to an unexpected incident, Hari's brother finally finds out about Hari's love affair with her boss. However, Hari threatens him not to complain to their parents, or else she will tell their parents that Han-min stealing money at their diner. One night, Yoo-ra asks Hari to come to see her, and she assumes that Hari is trying to destroy her relationship with Min-woo. Actually, Yoo-ra is dating Min-woo because she wants to hurt Hari, who has loved him. However, for some reason, Hari kept Yoo-ra's affair with another man a secret from Min-woo. Hari says she did all that to protect Min-woo, so he doesn't get hurt. Min-woo, who turned out to be there, overheard their conversation. Hari then blames Min-woo for being indecisive, so Yoo-ra accuses her of being the one who would ruin their love affair. After that, Hari and Tae-mo go on a date. However, suddenly it started to rain heavily. Knowing that Tae-mo is traumatized by the rain, Hari tries to distract him and make him feel comfortable so he doesn't think about his painful trauma. Mr. Kong, who finally finds out that Hari is in a relationship with his grandson and that she pretends to be Shin Goom-hui, then asks Hari to end her relationship with Tae-mo. Meanwhile, knowing that his grandfather met Hari, Tae-mo rushes after them. But on the way, Tae-mo gets into an accident. Luckily, he only suffered a minor injury to his arm. Tae-mo then reveals to his grandfather that he loves Hari very much and will fight for his love, even though his grandfather is against their relationship. That night, Hari accompanies Tae-mo to the hospital, where he finally tells her about his past when an accident took the lives of both of his parents. Hearing this, Hari then calms and comforts Tae-mo and unknowingly falls asleep beside him. The next day, Yu-ra exposes Hari and Tae-mo's love affair on social media and posts fake news about Hari having an affair with Min-gue. Suddenly it goes viral on social media because Tae-mo is a well-known company leader. Mr. Kong, who found out about it, ordered the fake news immediately removed from the internet. However, many people know about it, and Hari immediately becomes the subject of gossip from many people, including her co-workers. Mrs. Yo seemed annoyed because of the news that the project they were working on had to be transferred to another team. Hari feels very frustrated and guilty for causing her co-workers to suffer the consequences. Mr. Kong then intends to separate Tae-mo from Hari by sending them to different company branches. However, both Tae-mo and Hari firmly reject the transfer because they want to fight for their love. On the other hand, Hari's parents finally find out that Hari has been dating her boss, the leader of the company where she works. However, they seem to dislike Hari and Tae-mo's relationship. Meanwhile, Young-so looks surprised to find that her father approves of her relationship with Seung-hoon and instead invites them to have dinner together. Seung-hoon then proposes to Young-so, which she accepts. On the other hand, Tae-mo tries to find where Hari is deliberately distancing herself from everyone to calm her mind. They then finally meet and spend the night doing romantic things. The next day, Tae-mo drives Hari home and tries to get Hari's parents' blessing. Hari's father actually wants to bless their relationship. Still, he doesn't want his daughter to be hurt and suffer if she has a romantic relationship with Tae-mo because of the social gap between their family. However, Tae-mo tries to convince Hari's father that he won't let Hari suffer and will always protect her. Tae-mo then begins to clean up the mess by returning the project to Mrs. Yo and her team. After that, Min-gue decides to end his relationship with Yu-ra and plans to travel to Europe to increase his experience in the culinary field. Meanwhile, Young-so decides to resign from her father's company and is determined to achieve her own success without the help and support of her father. She plans to start her own business, and Seung-hoon is willing to be her first investor. On the other hand, Hari tries to please Mr. Kong and wants her love affair with Tae-mo to be approved. Initially, Mr. Kong looks cynical and annoyed at her, but he feels comfortable when Hari is around him over time because of her sincerity and kindness. However, Mr. Kong has to undergo treatment in the United States due to his deteriorating health condition. So Hari is forced to be separated from Tae-mo for a while because he has to accompany his grandfather. 1 year later, Tae-mo finally returns to South Korea to propose to Hari because his grandfather approved of their relationship. The moral that can be learned from this movie is to believe that true love will come to anyone, including an ordinary woman who never thought that she would win the heart of a rich man who was willing to leave everything to fight for his love.